Hello and welcome to the A&P. I am Alex Johansson and my co-host Patrick McCallum. Patrick,
Hello, everyone. How are you getting on?
we're having logical discussions about the state of the world. Let's get into it, brother. Hey, Patrick, how you doing, bud?
Not too bad at all. Not too bad. So, what video did you bring me today?
Well, this is Larry's Town Hall. This is a gentleman by the name of Larry O'Connor who has on a very special guest, a gentleman by the name of Andrew Arthur, who is an immigration judge, and is going to be speaking to the Kilmar Abrego Garcia situation as it is presented in all of its processes. He's going to give us a good look at immigration. He was an immigration judge on the west coast of the United States, and he has advised multiple presidents and heads of departments on the federal level on immigration. So I want to get into this.
Well qualified to speak on this matter, is this?
Well, I think old Larry here is going to give us a heads up on this fella. There's some intense eyebrows. All right, let's give this a shot. Let's see what Larry O'Connor has to say.
Right to it with Andrew Arthur. Now, he's currently a resident fellow in law and policy at the Center for Immigration Studies. But let me just give a quick resume check, Andrew, and you can help me out if I'm wrong. You were, in fact, an immigration judge back in the mid 2000s in York, Pennsylvania. You saw a lot of these immigration cases, immigration rulings, and things like that. You also served on Capitol Hill in multiple capacities, including with the National Security Subcommittee on the House of Representatives in Oversight and Government Reform. That was with Jason Chaffetz and then Subcommittee Chairman Ron DeSantis. We know that guy. And then also, you were on Capitol Hill as an oversight counsel for immigration for Chairman Sensenbrenner of Wisconsin and the House Judiciary Committee in the early 2000s for Homeland Security and Intelligence Reform, Terrorism Prevention. That's when Homeland Security was created in the wake of the 9/11 attack. So, did I get anything wrong? That's a pretty good resume and track record on this issue.
Yeah, no, there are a couple of things you left out that are going to be directly relevant to what we're going to talk about today. I started as a trial attorney in San Francisco with the Immigration and Naturalization Service, and I eventually worked my way up to INS headquarters. I was an associate general counsel, and I was chief of the National Security Law Division and an advisor to then Attorney General Janet Reno on immigration issues. So yeah, when you talk about I've handled these issues as an attorney. I've advised officials at the highest ranks of government on these issues, and I was an immigration judge for about 8 years. Wow. And of course, if you do the timeline, you'll see that I was actually the oversight counsel for immigration on September 11th, and one of the primary drafters of the Homeland Security Act. So yeah, I've got a little.
So INS is Immigration and Naturalization in the United States. So he advised the individual in charge of that entity on immigration and naturalization. Plus, he was on the bench for 8 years as an immigration judge.
Well qualified, well qualified.
Right, and he's still in the legal field. And he, like he said, advised on Capitol Hill, which is the term for Washington, D.C. and all the high mucky mucks in the federal government for the United States.
And where is he working again? He's working in the immigration.
He's an advisor. He is currently, he's seated at a legal counsel position somewhere, right?
Okay.
That would be way back at the 2:20 mark. I'm not going back 2 minutes for that. But with all the other stuff, yeah, well, he still has his hand in it. You know, he still has he still has an oar in the water, and he's still out there advising and doing all those things. So we've established his bona fides. Let's see.
Yes.
Let's
see what he has to say.
Yep. So, and the title, the video for this, Mr. O'Connor, is "The Due Process Lie and Maryland Man Hoax." So here we go.
A little bit of experience in these areas.
Well, and let's be clear here, because I think that's important. First of all, you pointed out, you mentioned Janet Reno. You have worked for Republican administrations and Democrat administrations with regard to these policies, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Up until really the end of the Obama administration, there really wasn't a whole lot of difference. We went from George H.W. Bush, my first president, to Bill Clinton, and nothing really changed. Then we went to George W. Bush, wasn't really a big change there. Barack Obama, up until about 2014, Immigration enforcement was one of those things that the White House largely kept its hands off of, didn't get involved, didn't attempt to intermeddle in the way that immigration officers do their business. It was, viewed as a bipartisan thing. Immigration enforcement, national security, local safety, all of those things were considered to be bipartisan issues.
So borders represent a difference in ideology. And when you open up those borders, you let other ideologies get into your cultural space. And sometimes that can be catastrophic, right? So until
do you think immigration shouldn't allow people from outside their own country in, or would there be exceptions?
Well, there should be exceptions, but a lot of it has to do with assimilation. In the UK, in the United States, and in Ireland, we have people coming in who are failing to assimilate into the culture. They want to take wherever they were and just make a satellite state of wherever they were, as opposed to going through the process. Say again?
Bring their baggage with them, as they say.
Well, yeah, but more than that, they want to practice whatever their culture is in a cultural space where it may not be applicable, right? Where their actions or activities might fall outside the Overton window, right? Of what is acceptable behavior, right? What are the social mores for your society? And when we open up the gates and just let anybody in, they're not necessarily going to be the best. But the other thing with that is sure, we can take all the best people you have. That's fine. But the problem is then those countries don't have those best people to solve problems locally, right? Their place can't get better if there aren't enough smart heads to solve problems, right? If G7 countries or Ireland or Scandinavia takes all the best of the best of the best from the third world, then the third world doesn't have the tools they need to succeed, right? So getting good people is great, but removing other countries' ability to solve their issues by taking those who have the ability to do so to solve those issues, slippery slope.
Sometimes, right? Immigration also works when we bring in a workforce to work jobs that our local population won't work. So there's kind of a flip in that coin as well. So we don't just take the best of the best. We also have to import, like in California, for instance, or other states in the United States, even Ireland. Our farming industry relies on a lot of workers coming in from abroad in order to do the harvesting and so on.
Right, but that means that the elites in society are the ones who are benefiting from paying people a much smaller wage, those who are willing to work in bad conditions, right?
Well, not just the elite, but it's also the people who buy the goods in the local supermarket, like potatoes, veg, and so on.
Right, but if the wages are higher, then you'll be able to afford that slight raise in cost by making sure that those who are performing the work are also safeguarded while doing that work, and that they too can have a positive and fruitful life.
In an idealized world, yes, obviously, but in the reality of economics, if you up the wages of everyone else, it also drives the goods up as well.
I agree, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. But that's more nuanced than the immigration thing we're getting into. We have decided to go down the rabbit hole. Let's get back to the
small bit.
Yeah. Well, we're good at that, Paddy. We're good at that.
Yeah, exactly.
So it was a seamless transition over all of those administrations.
Well, since you went there, let's start with that conversation. What do you think happened? What changed in 2014 that suddenly turned this into such a polarizing political issue?
Yeah, actually, and that's an easy answer. The Democrats had, lost elections in 2010, 2012. They won the presidency in 2012, but they, weren't able to regain their traction in Congress in 2014. And so at the end of November 2014, weeks after that election, Barack Obama's then DHS Secretary Jay Johnson issued guidelines prioritizing immigration enforcement. Those priorities that Secretary Johnson, who's the very good man, I've had the pleasure of meeting him, implemented, really started the restrictions on immigration enforcement. So when you saw Donald Trump run for president in 2016, when he talked about the border and he talked about immigration enforcement, it was really, about the restrictions that had been placed beginning at the end of November 2014 on ICE officers in particular in doing their jobs and deciding which cases to bring. When I was a an immigration judge when I started on the bench in 2006. Many of the people, probably half the people that I saw, were, had drug offenses. Many were drug dealers, had, major DUI offenses, and had engaged in domestic violence sometime around 2012, 2013, and then definitely into 2014. Those drunk driving cases, those domestic violence cases, they just didn't show up on my docket anymore. What I got was a lot more border cases, people who had alleged that they had a credible fear of return home. And, were in my court telling me about, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, but I also got a lot of more exotic countries. I had a couple of Nepalese cases, Sri Lankans, things like that. The border takes all comers. And as the Obama administration went on and into the Trump administration, those nationalities, started to, those, rarer nationalities started to really get into the mix. But it was nothing like once Joe Biden showed up.
So it's like Venezuela, El Salvador, Guatemala, all those places. That's why we see a lot of, there's a kind of order. It's a withholding order for immigration. You can say, I will leave, however, do not send me to X country. Like I can't go back to, say, Brazil or Guatemala, right? So you have a deportation order, but you can't go, they can't send you to, say, Guatemala, right? Or El Salvador. So they'll ship you. But the thing is what they were doing is they're saying, okay, why don't you go ahead and handle your own, we're going to trust you to go ahead and take yourself on back to wherever, so that you don't take yourself to the place you don't want to go, right?
Self-deport. So basically they leave it up to the individual to deport themselves.
Right. Figure it out, buy yourself a ticket, get on back to your house, get on back to your space, right?
Okay.
But then they weren't going, they weren't leaving. They're like, right. So they got a withholding order and they had X amount of time, 3 months, 6 months, a year, whatever, to get on back to their whatever country they were going to go to, but they decided to stick around, right? And the thing is, he was talking about all the drunk driving and the drug offenses and all that stuff. Like, if those people are in my society and they're not citizens, they should have a priority for being shipped back to wherever they are from, right? So it seems like a strange thing that you would want to keep those who have a criminal background, obviously a criminal background, multiple cases of violations against the criminal code or the penal code, right? And that he's not getting those cases means that there's a very strange pick and choose thing happening there in his court. So they're going to court, say, in the Superior Court of whatever county in the United States, but then the case is not being forwarded to immigration.
That is very, very unusual, isn't it?
It's very strange. Well, but it comes down to the state. Like sanctuary states have a no refer policy for those based on their immigration status, right? Most states have if you get caught for a crime, domestic violence, DUI, driving under the influence, or driving while intoxicated, depending upon the state in the United States you're in, it's an automatic referral to the immigration courts, right?
Does that go for people who are on work permits as well?
If you're not a citizen and you fail,
so it's across the board.
Yeah, it's across the board. So if your status is not citizen and you commit the crime, most states have an automatic referral to immigration, to the immigration court, right? But somehow some of these states who are sanctuary states or cities don't do the referral, right? And then when it comes down from the federal level that they don't want certain things done, then the states will generally comply, right? Because there's a superiority clause, a supremacy clause in the Constitution that says certain things are federally mandated or functioned with, like 8 USC for immigration and stuff like that, right? So USC is U.S. Civil Code. Anyway, so what'll happen is he's not getting those cases because there's something coming down, like he said, from the federal level that says that these kinds of cases are not going to get referred from criminal court or civil court to immigration, right? And it causes a population thing because our seats in Congress and the Electoral College are based on bodies, not on citizens. right?
All right.
So that's how you generate representatives in the House of Representatives, as well as seats in the Electoral College, which is the system by which we elect our president, which is a very strange one, and nobody wants to talk about that.
Yeah, nobody wants to talk about
Nobody
that.
wants to
Yeah,
talk about that. I
100%.
understand why they did it, and I don't have 2 hours to go through the whys, the wherefores, and the what fors, but it's better than just saying this guy got X more votes than that one. It's just, it's functionally, it's just a better way to do it. All right, here we go.
Okay.
Biden showed up, people from all around the world knew that the border was open. If they were going to come, now was the time to come.
Well, and we've seen those famous bar graphs that show exactly what you're talking about, where immediately, boom, like the number of illegal crossings and illegal immigrants just skyrocketed. I just want to be clear on the language here. You said in 2014, Jay Johnson, Homeland Security Secretary under the Obama administration, put restrictions on enforcement, which is a interesting way to say basically they stopped enforcing, right? Or they told the Border Patrol agents and ICE agents and various other law enforcement personnel to stop enforcing the law. That's what you mean by restrictions on enforcement. And you preface that by saying they had lost several elections. So I'm trying to connect these dots. Did they stop enforcing these immigration laws the way they had been and the way prior administrations had been because in some way they saw that policy translating to electoral success for them?
Yeah, that's a great question, Larry, and it's one I wish I could answer directly.
You don't have to join the dots on that one.
They probably viewed an increase in the unauthorized population in the United States or countenancing certain criminal aliens remaining in the United States as something that would give them a political advantage. I don't know what that political advantage was. I wasn't at the highest level of government at that time.
Well, if I may, I mean, it's got to be one of two things. Either they thought that not enforcing the law would curry favor to immigration rights activists and legal voters who wanted to give deference to illegal immigrants in this country, or more cynically, they were hoping that those illegal immigrants may participate in elections.
Yeah, honestly, I think it's the first. I think that it was this view that if they had a kinder, gentler immigration law.
In some places in sanctuary cities and states in the United States, they're allowing non-citizens to vote, and they're allowing non-citizens to hold offices, which is very strange.
Is that documented?
It's documented. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
New York and California are the two biggest violators of the citizens don't get to, like, non-citizens don't get to XYZ. So yeah, certain places in California are very strange with that.
Are non-citizens exempt from tax?
Oh, it depends. You can file taxes, and that was one of the issues they were having. So there was a request for records from the Internal Revenue Service to find out who's a non-citizen by their tax filing status. And the IRS lost their mind. Oh, they were real unhappy. But it just depends on what you can get away with.
But if a person is paying tax, you think do you think they should have a right to vote on who's governing their taxes?
No, they're not a citizen.
Okay.
Right? I don't get to dictate what happens in Ireland, even if I buy something over there and pay sales tax. Right?
Yeah,
if I do a job in Ireland and I get paid by some Irish company, and I pay taxes on that because that's how it goes in Ireland, I don't then get to make citizens that...
The reason I bring this up is one of those arguments I saw online. And it's definitely on Twitter. Yes, it was on Twitter, actually. I'm looking at it right now. It was on Twitter. And I was thinking the same way you were just thinking. Just because you pay taxes in a country doesn't automatically make you a citizen of that country.
Right, you're not a citizen.
It does give you certain rights if you're paying taxes, like rights to healthcare and so on, say in Ireland. But it doesn't give you a right to vote in our local elections and so on either.
Right, but that's a local or cultural thing. If I'm working in Ireland and I get injured on the job, I would expect that since it's a developed country, that I would get taken to the emergency room and it would be addressed, and then I would get billed. And my insurance, my health insurance, would work with the health insurance in Ireland to ensure that the care was paid for at whatever rate.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
But I have chosen to take a function or job. Let's say I'm a lineman and I put in electrical wire, conduit, whatever, right? And I'm over there and I'm doing that job and I get paid, say, €1,000 a week. right?
Okay.
And then 150 euros of that goes to the Irish government, and then I get to take my 850 euros and do with it whatever I desire, right? Well,
Yes.
part of that's going to go to Uncle Sugar in the United States. Uncle Sam's going to get a piece of that action, right? Because I'm a U.S. citizen, right?
Yes.
Right. So, but
no, actually, we actually have a tax agreement with the United States. Sorry for cutting across you.
Well, no, that's fine. But you understand what I'm saying. In general, it would work in X way, right?
Yeah,
so
X way, yeah.
It's just how those things would go. But just because I paid, at the end of the month, 600 euros in tax in your country, it doesn't. I'm not a resident of County Cork or Donegal or what. I don't live there. I'm not a citizen there. But because I've worked there, I am obligated to pay X taxes.
Yes.
It's just part of
you
how.
Pay tax where you work. Yeah.
Right. The Irish government has an agreement with companies that perform service in Ireland to pay X taxes, and those who get paid by that company then pay taxes on their personal income as well. I get it. I hate it. I despise it. Taxation is functionally theft, but if there's an agreement, there's an agreement, and if I want to make money, I'm going to have to play the game.
Yeah,
right?
you have to play the game. That's it.
Play the game. Yep.
Yeah.
You're going to pony up to the bar, you better pay the tax. Here we go.
That, they would draw people from the center. I think that they thought that people in the center, didn't really like full enforcement of the immigration laws. They liked border security, and they liked the most serious criminal aliens being taken out of the United States. But, there were a lot of articles that started to appear. There were actually two things during this period of time, Larry, that are important to keep in mind. One was the start of what we call the sanctuary movement. There were, cities and towns across the United States that stopped assisting in immigration enforcement. Let me just tell you an anecdote that'll really be eye-opening to you. When I was a young trial attorney in San Francisco, California, Border Patrol agents from the Livermore Border Patrol sector, which doesn't exist anymore, would go to the Alameda County Jail every morning, and they would look for criminal aliens who were in detention, who were removable, who had overstayed their visas, or more likely had entered illegally, and they would just take them into custody. Alameda County opened their jails to them. Around 2012, 2014, cities like, Chicago, Washington, D.C., New York started declaring themselves sanctuaries. They stopped allowing their cops to cooperate with ICE. They stopped allowing immigration officers into, their detention facilities and their jails to find these criminal aliens. And that simply emboldened the sanctuary jurisdictions. There were a couple of cases that the Obama administration really didn't fight very hard during this period of time, that sort of gave legal, a patina of legality to these sanctuary policies.
So Alameda County has a jail called Santa Rita Jail. I knew one of the correctional sergeants or one of the deputies that worked out there, and he told me in that time frame, it was very strange because that Livermore INS immigration crew, they were just literally told, nope, you don't get to come here anymore. And they were like, oh, what? They're like, yeah, like we're not going to let you in to our facility. We're like, okay.
But federal officers do have jurisdiction over state facilities, or is it down to the state?
Well, the problem is are you going to then force yourself into the facility?
Yeah.
Right. What are you going to do? Pull your guns on local law enforcement and tell them you're not going to do it? The other thing that comes into play here is a thing called posse comitatus. So federal law enforcement is not allowed to, unless there's a supremacy thing in place, to perform law enforcement actions, certain kinds of law enforcement actions. This is such a murky subject. It's difficult. So state governments can use what they need from law enforcement to perform the law enforcement tasks within the state, right? With the supremacy clause in place, if someone's in violation of federal law, then federal agents, in this case, INS agents, right, ICE, are allowed to go get people, right? But it's a fine line for me to go into a state facility to get people out of that facility, or in this case, Santa Rita, which is a county jail in Alameda County, California, right? So normally law enforcement agencies work together to get bad guys and bring those bad guys where they need to go, right?
Okay.
But if the state or county facility isn't working nice with the federal government, then the federal government has to go find those people once they've been released from a county jail facility or a prison, which is a state level, like state of California prisons or whatever, not to be confused with the Department of Justice, which has their...
It is very unusual, isn't it? That the fact that your federal law enforcement is getting such pushback from the states.
Right. Well, there's somebody's getting advantage from it, or it wouldn't be done that way, right?
Okay.
So I don't exactly know, just like Mr. Arthur is saying, I don't know exactly what that advantage is. Like, I can draw the line, but I don't know exactly who is benefiting from it. Like, where's the win, right?
Where's the payoff for someone? Yeah, I understand.
Right. Well, and it might just be that it's a victim mentality payoff, right? Which is a loss for everybody. So, all right, here we go.
Okay.
And so it became a vicious circle of, non-enforcement restrictions, more non-enforcement. Yeah. But I think that the way that the Obama administration read the room, and remember, by November 2014, Barack Obama didn't have any more elections that he could participate in as president.
Right.
I think that he was attempting to curry favor with a lot of the people that you see make up the base of the Democratic Party today. College-educated whites, particularly women. And, they hoped to also bring in the burgeoning population of Hispanic citizens of the United States. I think that they believed that if they didn't enforce the immigration laws, that would somehow please Hispanic Americans. That
it did not.
Yeah,
it did not make them happy at all.
No.
Because those who went through the port of entry and did all the proper procedural things to become citizens don't then want someone else to come along and get freebies when they had to do hard work and show they'd be willing to learn American history and that they'd be willing to assimilate. And so then the rule followers are not going to like the rule breakers.
Okay.
Yeah. So the vote for President Trump from the Hispanic community during the last election, the most previous one, was massive. It was massive. Like the swing from the previous election, from the one where old Frank Joseph Biden became the president, and when Donald John Trump became president, 2020 to 2024, massive, massive flip.
And why do you think that was?
Because the Hispanic community that wants that followed the rules and did all the things to achieve citizenship in the legal manner didn't want those who were illegal just getting it handed to them, and they realized that there were tons and tons of criminals in that mix, a lot.
Yeah, right? There was. Yeah, well, obviously, if they're jumping over the border and not going through the legal ways, so, usually a reason why.
Right. Well, and it wasn't just immigration, illegal immigration from Mexico. It is anybody who could get their feet onto South America and get through the Darien Gap were just coming across the border, right? At a minimum, 10 million people from the onset of Frank Joseph Biden's presidency.
10 million.
Plus. Yeah, double the amount of people who reside in your country of Ireland came into the United States for those 4 years.
So for every year Biden was your president, 2.5 million people came over the border illegally.
Yes. Every day, tens of thousands of them. Every
tens of
day.
Thousands.
Yep, every day.
Okay.
That is insanity. That is not a way to protect the culture of a country, to let a huge percentage of people just cross your border.
Wow.
That they were in some way simpatico with non-enforcement. The last election certainly showed us that wasn't true. But I think that was the way that they read it. And the second part of that, I think, was a happy coincidence for them. Remember, when you talk about the places that migrants generally go to when they enter illegally, we're talking about New York, California, to a degree, Texas. in Florida, but a lot of red states, in a lot of states, California and New York, they were losing residents. The census only counts people. It doesn't count citizens of the United States. And if you go to California, where 10% of the population are unauthorized aliens or illegal aliens, that really makes an electoral difference. So, particularly when you get around to Los Angeles.
So again, remember I told you that our seats in Congress and the House of Representatives are dictated by people, not citizens. That's the case here. The other issue we have in the United States is over 50% of the homeless in the United States now reside in the state of California. It is bad. Wow. So we have tons and tons and tons of extra bodies that all they are is fodder for gerrymandering districts and ensuring that we get more seats in the House of Representatives. Because if our population expands, then...
When a person... Sorry for cutting you across there, Alex. When you're going to vote in the United States, you go to wherever you vote, do you have to show your ID before you get your election card?
It depends on where you are. Generally speaking, there's a list and you point to it and go, that's me.
And they don't ask you for ID?
No.
They don't ask you for driving license, passport, anything like that? Because I know over here, when we go down and vote in our local elections or even for European elections, when we go to our voting spot, we have to bring either our driving license, we have to bring photographic of ID, a driving license, a PPS card, or a passport. So even though you might know the person marking off the register, they literally have to physically see your ID.
When I went to go vote for in the last election for the presidency, like I went to pull my ID out and they're like, no, absolutely not. No, thank you. Here's your card. Here's your thing. Do your thing. I was like, oh, okay, thanks. But I was on the registrar's list in the county in which I reside when I went to go to the place where I vote. Right.
Okay.
So
even then, it's still...
Right, but the thing is, a generated list is different than verifying somebody's name with a picture ID that says, yes, you are Alex Johansson. You are allowed to vote in Fresno County, and specifically in the city of Fresno, in this place. Generally, it's going to be a school or a church. Those are generally the two places that
over here, actually. Yeah, it's usually a school or a church. Yeah, over here.
Yeah, it's strangely enough. For a while, I lived in a small place in Contra Costa County, California, where it was someone's garage. So
what?
Yeah, it was somebody's garage.
Somebody's garage.
Yeah, it was a nice garage. It was a big garage.
Okay, yeah. Don't get me wrong. It probably is a nice garage, but a garage.
Yeah, seriously, it was.
I can't understand why a country that like the United States that is so strict on everything. It's very loose when it comes to elections. It's very. That's me on the list. There's a card, but no verifying your ID or who you are, or it's unusual. It is very unusual in the United States.
It is more nuanced than that. I'm sure they will tell you. It just seems strange to me.
Yes,
right?
It is.
It also leads to some weird victim mentality stuff too that we can get into down the line. Very strange.
Okay.
All right, here we go.
When you look at certain members of Congress, I'm not going to mention names, although take a look at Maxine Waters' district. You'll see that many of the people who live there aren't actually citizens. They don't have the ability to vote. I don't think that the intention was that they would vote illegally in those elections, but because they couldn't vote, that meant that the people who were there would have a stronger vote. There were about 880,000 people per congressional district. If 20% of those people are unauthorized aliens who can't vote, that makes it a whole lot easier to win an election.
And it gives those states more representation in the House of Representatives than the actual voting public and the citizens of that state. And that also translates to the Electoral College vote, because those members of the House of Representatives translate into electoral votes for the state. This is a great backgrounder for us in a historic perspective, Mr. Arthur. One more question on the history here, and then I want to move us forward to what's going on right now. But that has to do with sanctuary city policies, as you just laid out. Sanctuary cities and sanctuary counties, sanctuary states, they were sold to the American people with a very heart-wrenching kind of message. Victims of crimes who may be in this country illegally, we were told, would be hesitant to report those crimes or seek assistance from the police because those people feared that they would be deported. So therefore, they were suffering as victims of crime. That's what we were told. And they wanted to give sanctuary to illegal immigrants in this country to report crimes in their communities so that they didn't have any fear of being deported.
So this goes to an asylum claim, right? So if there is something happening to you in the United States, if you're illegal and someone is causing you issues and you say, hey, right, I'm seeking what is functionally an asylum claim, although I am here illegally, right? It's kind of an oxymoron, right? So let's say I'm an illegal alien. I get to a place and someone purports a crime upon me of some sort, right? Let's just an easy one, battery.
What happens if they go to police service?
What is supposed to happen, or what actually happens in sanctuary cities?
Right. What actually happens in sanctuary city? We're going to use that example first.
Their citizenship isn't taken into account in the individual who commits the crime. Like a PC 245, like a battery, which is the I physically touch you, right? Assault and battery are different. Assault is a credible threat, right? If I tell you I'm gonna beat you up, or if I hold up a crowbar or something, and you're like, "Oh my God, that's a baseball bat," that's assault. Or if I tell you, like, I'm gonna beat you up, right? The immigration status of the individual who reports the crime isn't taken into account.
Okay.
So they can report that crime, right?
Okay. Sounds very straightforward.
It's very straightforward. But the problem with that is the person should not have been there in the first place. So if you were not here illegally, the crime could not have been perpetrated against you because you're not supposed to be here.
That's okay.
Right? If you are here illegally in violation of 8 USC, and you see what I'm saying? So it's difficult to parse that out, right? But the individual who commits the crime, also in sanctuary places, their immigration status isn't necessarily considered either.
Okay.
Right?
So what happens in the non-sanctuary cities then?
In a non-sanctuary city or state, they will report both of them to INS, and both of them will probably get shipped. But the individual who's a criminal, who has perpetrated a crime and is then convicted of that crime, will have a higher priority for removal from the country. Generally speaking,
will they be jailed first and then removed from the country? Yes,
generally speaking, they will be jailed first, unless their crime is. So in the United States, there's jails and prisons. Jails are generally speaking, if you have less than, like, say, a 2-year sentence, and it's a misdemeanor. Generally speaking, your felonies are going to go to some state prison or penitentiary. In the state of California, if you commit a felony, you'll be part of the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation's business to deal with. But let's say you're in Alameda County and you violate the law, then you'll end up in, say, Santa Rita, which is the prison in Alameda County, California. That would be where you would go, right? So, but then when that term of service is up, then you would be shipped to wherever.
But so do you think that? I think I can understand why they brought in the sanctuary cities now when I listen to what this gentleman just said. That it gives victims of a crime an opportunity to report that crime without fear of being deported.
Right, but they should not have been here in the first place. If they were not here, say in the next town over, then the crime couldn't have been committed against them.
Yeah, I understand that point, but it's still a bit, I don't know. Yeah, we have a different procedure over here as such.
Right. So if it's one of those things, you put yourself in the position, you are here illegally. I understand that you want to be in a place to have a better opportunity for success.
Yes.
But there's a way to do it, and you didn't do it the correct way, right?
Okay.
So.
Yeah. As I say, we're slightly different over here with our immigration service. We're very straightforward. Is when your person gets jailed for a crime, after they serve their crime, they're deported straight away,
right?
With no hope of return to Ireland.
And the federal government is now targeting sanctuary states and telling them they're going to have to go ahead and open up their prisons and jails so that ICE can go get people based on their immigration status. The state of California was issuing licenses to people who were not citizens, So the state of California is super reticent to give that information up. Same with New York and a few others, Illinois, Wisconsin, stuff like that. So Ohio.
And do they legally have to give? Does the state legally have to give it up?
Yeah, the supremacy clause indicates that if there is criminal activity and we request the record specifically to determine if there was criminal activity, then the state is obligated to give the information up. That's again, why the IRS was so mad.
Well, yeah, but when you see a rich state like California, they can just turn around and just say, well, no. You know, I mean, they're in the financial position where they don't have. They can't say no.
Except the governor of the state of California, Gavin Newsom, just told us that somehow we're missing $12 billion, and we lost over $20 billion from the federal government that was sent here to help us with the homeless issue, money that was issued to NGOs, and then the money just disappeared.
Well, we're definitely going to do an episode on NGOs. Trust me, I have a lot of experience in that sector.
Oh, you got some information for us there, Patrick?
Oh, I know a lot of friends of mine who worked for NGOs over the years, and
I don't. It's pretty bad.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, like I said,
I'm going to say the word these charities. By the way, yeah, I said that in quotations.
Yeah, you didn't say it very charitably. I could tell.
No.
Here we go.
Okay, here we go.
Was there any historical basis for that policy? I don't remember anybody being deported because they reported being a victim of a crime.
Yeah, no, there wasn't. And in fact, we would go to great lengths to ensure that individuals who had been victims of crime, weren't subject to immigration enforcement because of that. And another thing to keep in mind, Larry, we hear this all the time, about these, women primarily who come to the United States, marry United States citizens, are treated abominably. And then the American, spouse says, if you go, if you want to get a divorce or, you leave me, I'm going to go to immigration and, we're going to make sure that you get deported. Basically, it's a way of keeping those people in a, virtual servitude. And
that is actually abominable that somebody would do that.
Yeah.
That is horrific.
We have had actually similar cases actually happen over here in Ireland, where Irish citizens, older Irish men, I'm going to say straight out, older Irish men, go abroad to the likes of Thailand, Philippines, Indonesia, marry these young ladies. I'm going to say, well, they're 18, 19 years of age, so bring them over and, not treat them so well when they get here.
Yeah, it's functionally chattel slavery with yes, I will get you deported back to your country.
Yes, please. Let's call them what they are. Let's call them dirty old men. I said that's the most polite term I can use for some of these guys.
It's dirtier than that, but we'll go with dirty old men.
Yeah, we'll go with that. It's the most polite term we can use for YouTube. And over here, I presume it is definitely different over in the States. But over here, if you marry an Irish citizen, it doesn't automatically grant you Irish citizenship. So I think that is different from the United States. But over here, if you marry an Irish citizen,
right, there's a process here. There's a process here where if you marry a national from another country, what you need to do to get them their citizenship.
Yeah, we go through a very rigorous process here if you marry a non-Irish citizen. But we had a referendum to take that out of our constitution.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, back in 2000, I'll get the right date. I think 2005, 2006. I was working a lot of the time, so.
Well, I will task you then with creating a short for the crew, so you can go and explain that. You brought it up. Now you get to own it, bud. Here we go.
Now I get to own it. Yeah. So
bondage.
Well, because it actually came about, believe it or not, from a massive immigration issue that happened around that time, where with a lot of Nigerians probably coming over pregnant, and have a kid, and then that time you would automatically become an Irish citizen, and we were kind of getting overwhelmed.
Ah, the anchor baby. Got it.
Yes, but also the marriages and all this. So in the end, I think it was Fianna Fáil was the government at the time. I remember, as I said, I was working quite a lot of time, so a lot of hours of time.
So it wasn't People Before Profit?
Oh no, this is long before them. I think people forget that Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael are very right-leaning. So just to calm all that down, we put it to the people, because if our constitution has to be changed, it's done through a referendum. So we got that out of our referendum.
All right,
Now
so
they're
then the
trying to-
Oireachtas works that out with the Dáil Éireann?
No, what happens is the Dáil calls for a referendum on amending the constitution, and then it's debated in the Senate, and then it goes to the people.
Okay.
Well, it goes to the president, who normally 9 times out of 10 usually signs off on these things. But
so the Dáil Éireann says there's an issue. The Senate then goes through the debate process to figure it out, and then it's issued as a referendum to the people to vote on?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, there we go.
Very straightforward.
Yeah. Of course, because nothing in politics is bendy and weird.
Within their own households. We knew that, and we deliberately didn't go after those people. In addition, Larry, Congress created the T visa for trafficking victims, so they'd come forward, and the U visa for people who were victims of crimes. Specifically, so if we came upon one of these people and we wanted to use them, state and local wanted to use them as witnesses in those crimes, they could offer them a visa that would allow them to stay in the United States legally. Right. But here's really the next part, and this gets to a bigger issue that you alluded to. There's no science behind this whatsoever. If you talk, whenever you listen to these chiefs of police elected or, elected prosecutors, they'll tell you, well, it makes it a lot more likely that people come forward and report crimes, if we don't, turn over criminals to immigration. There is no science behind that whatsoever. That's a theory, and it's one that the center has attempted to, prove or disprove in reality. Yeah. And we've been unable to find it. We find that, Hispanic Americans, who make up the bulk of the unauthorized population in the United States, are no more or less likely to go to the police in sanctuary jurisdictions than they are in non-sanctuary jurisdictions. But here's really the critical part. And again, this is my theory. I can't quantify it. I actually think, one, we know that alien criminals are more likely to prey in immigrant communities. You commit your crimes where you live, and most of them live in immigrant communities. I think that it's a lot more likely that people in those communities, in sanctuary communities, won't go to the police because they know that those people who harm them, who rob them, who rape them, aren't going to be deported at the end of the day. They know they live in sanctuary communities too. There was a notable case in northern.
So that means that the people who live there that are committing the crimes are not going to get deported, along with the people who are the victims of those crimes.
Okay, that sounds pretty straightforward, really.
Well, he says it's a theory, and I think as a hypothesis, it goes a pretty long way. It makes a lot of sense based on the amount of people that are deported from sanctuary cities and states. So it stands to reason, but it might not be nuanced enough, because nuance. So
Northern Virginia about a year ago, involving an individual who had engaged in sexual abuse on a local running trail. After this individual was arrested and, the facts of that case came out, many more people came forward and said, he did the same thing to me. I just didn't go to the police. In Northern Virginia, everybody who is here legally goes to the police. But if you're not, here legally, you know the game. You know how this is going to go down. You don't want that person back in your community to harm you because you snitched on them. Many of these people come from, Latin American countries where snitching, results in retribution. So I actually think that sanctuary cities are completely backward. And I wish that that's an issue.
Yeah, the sanctuary cities don't perform the task as labeled. It just doesn't work. They're like, it works like this. And you're like, that doesn't purport with reality. Try again. They're like, no, I believe it's true. So it's true. And then you're like, evidentiarily, it is not true. Try again. I believe in a thing so strongly, it is true. No.
Right.
No.
Right.
No. Not how that works, bud.
That Congress would examine and that, academics would examine. we would get to a result one way or the other, but it's not within their political interest to do so.
So it sounds like the theory is, and it certainly makes sense, that the entire basis of the sanctuary policies were created without any science or data to back up the rationale behind them. And ironically, it ends up harming the people of immigrant communities, even those who are in this country illegally, as victims of those crimes, because they know ultimately their perpetrator is not going to get deported. Therefore, they're more reticent to report those crimes. It's completely
right. And then there's more retribution from the criminal element in that area to say, well, we did a bad thing to you, and then you told on us. Like, yeah, you did a bad thing. You violated social mores. You committed some heinous act, and I don't want that done to me, so I'm going to go to law enforcement. And then if you know that those people aren't going to get deported or dealt with or even jailed appropriately, because if they put them into the jail or the prison, then the federal government's going to come by and go, hey, give me that guy because he's a bad guy. And they're going to be like, no, you can't have him. And then the federal government will be like, supremacy clause, give me the guy. And they'll be like, I don't like that. So they not only get to commit the crime, right, against whomever, then they don't get jailed or put in prison, and then they commit the crime again, or they seek retribution for someone saying, hey, you did a bad thing, as opposed to owning their failed behavior and trying to become a better citizen or attempting to assimilate appropriately. They're like, nah, we'll just be bad.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of a crazy loop of, it's not the best.
completely upside down.
But,
All right, that
he's saying this rose from 2014 all the way up to 2023, 2024, that way.
Yes.
So is it a constant upwards spiral all the way through those years?
No, the border was actually fairly secure under the 45th presidency of Donald J. Trump, but it switched back. When Frank Joseph Biden became the president, he nixed a huge percentage of Donald J. Trump's executive orders, like a huge percentage. But what's strange is Joseph Biden and Donald Trump's presidencies, except for immigration and a couple other issues, look almost identical.
Yeah,
right?
I was about to say they deported the same amount of numbers all the way through.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. That is incorrect. It's not about the deportation numbers. That immigration problem, when Frank Joseph Biden, when President Biden, when he was in office, came in, the numbers immediately ramped up to absolutely insane numbers. So even if the amount of people they deported was the same, the percentage of people that President Biden sent away based on the 10 plus million that came in, as opposed to the far less amount that came in during the 45th presidency of Donald Trump, is far smaller, right? Like the per capita, right? You following that? Right. So
yeah, I understand, Jeff.
But the military thing and the immigration thing and the DEI thing are the three things that they were wildly different on. But besides that, their presidency looked a lot alike. I know it's rough for Republicans to even think that that's the case, but it's the case. And I know Democrats don't want to hear that it looked a lot like Trump's presidency, except for just a few narrow items, right? And I think that has to do with an entrenched bureaucracy that's functionally running things. They know the president's gone in 4 years, but that NGO or that department, like, what was it? They just sent a guy from the ATF. They had a fellow resign. They fired a guy that had been there for 30 plus years, right? He was there at the Waco thing with the Branch Davidians, and he was just released from the ATF a few months ago, which means he was part of that policy making group, right? And he was the head of the ATF for a little while as well, right? So
even after the disaster of Waco,
he got awards for that. He got awards.
He got awards for Waco.
He got awards for that. Yeah, that was not good.
That's like sorry.
We'll do something on that fella as well, but I don't really want to go into that guy. But it's a bureaucratic drive problem. It's a bureaucratic drive problem. So I know I'm going to be here in this department, whatever the department is, right, of the 400 plus departments that comprise the federal government that are supposed to be answerable to the executive branch, right? The Article 2 executive branch. Does that make sense? So they're supposed to be under that, and their authority stems from the executive branch's authority to enforce laws as they're created by Congress.
Okay.
Right? So all those agencies, DEA, ATF, FBI, and any other of those three-letter spots, right? Right.
Okay, all the three-letter agencies. All right.
Right. Almost all of them. The Federal Reserve is a little bit different,
okay.
but almost all of them.
Yeah.
Right. Almost all of them derive their power from the executive branch. Right. So Article 1 is Congress, and Congress says these are the laws as we make them.
Okay.
Then the executive branch is the one who executes those things that the Congress has decided are the laws.
Okay.
And then the other thing the president does is he's the commander in chief of the military, and he is in charge of 100% foreign policy. Right, because you need to have to be able to pivot quickly to interact with other countries, and that's why the executive branch has that power in the United States.
Same as our Taoiseach components. Yeah, exactly.
Right. So you're Taoiseach, right? So, but the judicial, which is the Article 3 branch, but only SCOTUS is mentioned as the Article 3 judicial branch, is the check and balance against either the executive branch epically failing in some fashion, right, in enforcement of, right? So, and which means that the Supreme Court should be the only ones who can possibly enjoin a three-letter agency because they derive their power from the executive branch, not any lower district court judges, right? There shouldn't be a nationwide injunction, right, or TRO that can affect the Article 2 executive branch unless it comes from the Supreme Court of the United States. Because
if the Supreme Court turns around and says to the president, you cannot do X, Y, and Z, can the Supreme Court do that?
They can issue an order that says something like that, yes.
Okay.
But if it's foreign policy or a military function where Congress has declared war, then no.
No.
No. Because it's not
but
their lane.
Is a deportation order, and they override that?
It depends on if the deportation order doesn't function within the scope of, what's the term? There's a term for it. Due process.
Due process, okay.
Due process, okay. And due process isn't always a jury of your peers, right? And this has to do with the Alien Enemies Act, that if there's a proclamation, the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 dictates that the president, the Article 2, President of the United States, has as wide a berth of power as possible to ensure the safety of the country by being able to declare a certain kind of enemy and then take them out of the United States, right? So the due process, like the one for the Alien Enemies Act, is, are you from Venezuela? Are you not a citizen? Are you male and at least 14 years of age? And are you a member of Tren de Aragua? If those four things are true, your due process in a habeas hearing, which is the production of the body, so wherever that individual is, right, let's say northern Texas, right, then there should be a habeas hearing by an immigration judge in northern Texas that checks those four boxes. Venezuelan, yes. Non-citizen, yes. Over 14 years of age, yes. Member of Tren de Aragua, yes. If those four boxes are checked, then they should be shipped. Specifically based on how that law works as it was presented by the second president of the United States, John Adams.
I remember this Alien Enemies Act is funny enough because I was watching a documentary about, I watch a lot of history documentaries before anyone judges me. And I was watching about American isolationism before World War II, and then as they got involved in World War II after Pearl Harbor and so on.
Yep.
And I remember that particular act being used against the Japanese population in America at the time.
Yes.
And where they set up, let's call them what they are, camps. It's the most polite term I could use for these places.
Yes.
In this interest, in when after World War II, the American population was horrified by what they'd done to the Japanese population in America at the time because of this similar act. And then there was talks about getting rid of that act, but obviously they never took it
No,
off
they
the
didn't.
books.
And it's not a similar
No.
act. It is specifically the same act that was
It is
used.
specifically the same act,
And it was
yes.
also an act that was used to remove those of German descent in the United States who were espousing the National Socialist Party in Germany as being the good and right way to do things, which it obviously was not.
Funny, yeah, but what was very funny about that is there was a lot of Americans, and I know it's hard for people to understand, but there was a lot of Americans who were part of the Silver Legion of America, if you want to look that up.
Yes, I agree.
And they were based in the Nazi Party of America. They never really they kind of died off, saving they really declined, you could say, in the late 60s down to 70s, into the 80s. They kind of hung on there. But they kind of have comebacks from the 90s onwards.
Right. Well, and to be fair, right now we're not putting Tren de Aragua Venezuelan citizens into, and you're right, let's say it's a concentration camp is what that would be, right? We're not putting them in camps.
No.
We're not. But,
no.
But their due process specifically is check those 4 boxes, you get deported. Right? That's...
Yeah.
And if you have a withholding order or anything else from before, it no longer applies if those 4 boxes are checked because your due process has been changed, right?
Okay, and how did they prove that an individual is part of this organization?
Generally speaking, the district court judge who's in charge of it or the immigration court judge will be presented evidence by the state or by the attorney who is on the... Not the defense, the
prosecution.
The prosecution. Oh my God.
Yes.
Oh, words are hard. Words are hard. So the prosecuting attorney who works for a state agency says, here's the evidentiary things I have in discovery. They don't even necessarily get to a formal discovery, but these are the things I have that show, right? And in certain cases, it's either proved by that district court, the immigration court, or on appeal if an individual appeals it, right? So
right. So what form, of course, this evidence could take any form. Could it be witnesses or electronic, or?
It's going to be functionally who you hang out with. Are there other validated gang members?
All right. So if
do you have tattoos that indicate that you are a member of the gang? Do I have recordings? Do I have video? Do I have other kinds of media proof that show that you are in fact a member of...
So it has to be an overwhelming body of proof, not just one piece of evidence.
It's going to be more than one, but it doesn't have to be absolutely overwhelming. It doesn't have to be absolutely overwhelming. But there just has to be a reasonable amount of proof that says, hey, you know, he rolls with this set of guys, and these guys...
Here's our 12 to 20 pieces of evidence proving that this guy is part of this organization.
Or he's been incarcerated, and the state of Illinois determined that he was a member of, say, Mara Salvatrucha, MS-13, or Tren de Aragua, or whatever, right? And then those local, those state and local government incarceration type facilities have validation processes themselves. So functionally, if it's that kind of deal where ICE goes in to get somebody out of a prison somewhere, they're going to say, okay, so part of his background is he is housed in a certain area in a prison based on his gang affiliation, right?
Yeah.
So there's a preponderance of evidence there for almost all of them, right? It's not just that guy kind of looks like he's Tren de Aragua. Ship him. That guy kind of looks like he's Mara Salvatrucha.
Yeah.
He looks like he's MS-13. Ship him.
Well, the reason I'm asking these questions because I know later on that it's interesting to see the evidence they have against this particular gentleman.
Yes.
And it comes down to
Kilmar, Abrego, Garcia.
Yeah, it comes down to very true evidence is the best word I could describe it in a lot of ways.
Well, yeah, he's going to go into it specifically on this one, so we'll let Mr. Arthur speak to it first before we get back around into it.
A great background for us and great history on how we got here. Let's talk about where we are right now with the Trump administration. And for those who are just joining the stream, we're speaking with Andrew Arthur. He's the resident fellow in law and policy for the Center for Immigration Studies, and he has a long track record legislatively on Capitol Hill and also as an immigration judge. President Trump's
That's where he's working, Paddy. Did you catch it?
Yeah.
Okay.
enforcement policies right now, as we've seen, pretty well documented and publicly displayed with the border czar Tom Homan and the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. They're busting the bad guys, they're deporting them, they're sending them out. Is there anything really different going on right now than maybe under the Clinton administration, or maybe under the Bush administration, more accurately, since that was during the Department of Homeland Security? Clinton was INS, which is different than ICE and DHS because 9/11 changed everything. So let's go to George W. Bush. Is Trump doing anything radically different with regard to enforcing immigration policy than maybe President Bush did, or even the early days of President Obama?
At the street level, absolutely not. I mean, the one thing that they're doing differently, Larry, is that they're, going out on the streets and finding these people, in their houses or, actually on the street. And the reason that they have to do that is because of the sanctuary policies you and I just talked about. Back, in the INS days and, San Francisco, we didn't have to go into Oakland, California to find somebody at their house. I mean, going into Oakland, California is scary enough. Looking for a, known criminal at their house is really scary.
Oakland, California is in Alameda County, just as a heads up. And that's why the Santa Rita jail thing, Livermore is in the county over, but it's connected to.
But why is he saying it's so is a rough? Is it a rough area? But it's the way I just reading between the lines by
Oakland is very rough. Yeah. It's it's something special actually. The crime there is there's a lot of Crips and Bloods and other kinds of gangs. Yeah, it is rife. It is rife with criminal activity.
Okay.
So one day come out this way, maybe we can just take a tour of San Francisco and Oakland. I'm sure you'd love to see it as a fella from a foreign land.
Yeah. So sounds like no.
Oh, you can watch dope deals and hookers and all kinds of fun stuff.
Yeah, that sounds like Dublin.
We could just pick them up in the jails, which is a controlled setting. And that's where ICE or, the old INS would prefer to do their business. Because we have these sanctuary policies, you'll see, Tom Homan, Kristi Noem, Kash Patel going out, into the community and arresting people. That's the part that's different. But it's not because, they've changed their strategy. It's because they have to go out into the streets to houses to find those individuals. It's very dangerous for our ICE officers. And somebody's really going to get hurt. Not only is it a danger to the ICE officers, it's a danger to the aliens they're looking for, of course, because when they run, anything could happen. But more importantly, it's a danger to the community, to all of the people around them. When they start running, when, people start getting excited, people get hurt.
Okay, so other than that aspect of it, and that's again because of the policies in these dominantly blue Democrat cities that have decided to set up sanctuaries, and they don't actually make the transfer to federal law enforcement in the jail cell or in the police station instead of out on the streets. Other than that, pretty much the same policy. So here's why I'm confused, Andrew Arthur.
I can see now why it's very, very dangerous for ICE officers.
Right. So the transfer policy functions like this. If you go to, say, a level 4 institution, right? And generally speaking, American prisons function on a level 1, 2, 3, 4, where 1 is the lowest level. The fella that got a DUI or got into a bar fight, he's going to be put in prison for, a year and a half, 2 years. He's going to go to a level 1 facility. And level 4 is big lockup. Big bad guys, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So the agency will come through the gates and be checked out to make sure that they're supposed to be there, and they will have the appropriate paperwork to requisition a body, right? So we're going to move the body against its will. If the individual does not want to come out of their cell, then we'll get what's called an extraction order, and then there'll be a controlled use of force, and that individual's body will be moved against its will.
They'll just go in and just collect the individual. Okay.
Right. So then
they'll work in theory, as they say.
Right. Well, but again, if that individual doesn't want to move, then you start executing a controlled use of force. You move that body against its will. You take it to a transfer area. That individual is then transferred in custody over to whatever agency is picking it up, be it another institution within whatever state it is, be it parole, be it another state agency. Let's say they're going from Washington State to Texas, right? or California to Idaho, they will come get their guy and then they will put them in the vehicle and they will, generally speaking, they don't fly with them, they will drive with them. It is easier to control them in a vehicle than it is to control them on a flight.
yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, but yeah, there's a pretty serious process involved there with moving a body, but it is still safer for the community to have a controlled use of force done by correctional staff to move a body to a transfer area to hand them off than it is to have gun-toting agents running down the street.
Yeah, they're trained for that specific.
Yeah. Well, no, and don't get me wrong. ICE and DHS and all them, they're well trained. But like he was saying, when people get excited and there's guns and tasers and, you know, civilians everywhere.
Mistakes happen on both sides. Yeah, mistakes can happen.
Yeah. So not only the individual who should be incarcerated or transferred can get hurt, but anybody in that community. If they're armed and they decide they want to have a gunfight or they want a suicide by cop, those bullets got to go somewhere. And sometimes they don't always go where they're supposed to go. So,
yes.
Here we go.
We've got judges, federal judges, blocking many of the deportation efforts of the Trump administration. If the law has not changed and judges allowed it to happen under previous presidents, what is the legal rationale for judges blocking these efforts now?
Well, there is one big change between the Trump administration and what they're doing today and, you know, what has happened in the past. In March, the president issued Presidential Proclamation 10903, in which he, explained that he's going to use the Alien Enemies Act in order to remove individuals of a gang I never even heard of up until 3 years ago, Tren de Aragua, or TDA. TDA is a Venezuelan prison gang that started at Tacoron prison in the Aragua state of Venezuela that followed migrant trails of individuals in the Venezuelan diaspora out of Venezuela into Colombia, through Chile, into Brazil, and up, into Central America. Up until Joe Biden, Tren de Aragua didn't leave South America. And they engage in a lot of very sophisticated crimes. In fact, Larry, if I told you that TDA runs a gold mine in Venezuela, you probably wouldn't believe me. But
wait, a gold mine?
Yeah, they run a gold mine. I believe.
I thought gangs did, like, they dealt with drugs and maybe extortion, maybe some prostitution. A gold mine?
Not just a gold mine, Larry. It's the fourth largest gold mine in the world, as I understand it.
Yes, that is actually true.
Right, but the thing with that
I actually saw that in your news myself.
Right, but the thing with that is it means that they're contributing to the Venezuelan government in some fashion, right?
Well, you might be shocked to know the Venezuelan government is a small bit corrupt.
What?
I know. It's shocking. I know.
The Maduro regime is corrupt. Huh.
Oh yeah, I know. It's shocking that people. Yeah, that might shock me.
You are lucky I'm seated right now. I have to find a fainting couch.
It was just funny when he was in the White House and he's sitting down with a big smiley head in him, and I'm kind of going, he's a corrupt, murderous person.
Oh, didn't want to use the word bastard.
Oh, I really try not to. And I'm sitting there kind of going,
oh,
why is Trump even having a meeting with this guy? I don't know. I was just shocked. I was just kind of surprised.
Well, his meeting with Bukele was a little bit different. In fact, a lot of questions about the, in quotes, Maryland man came up in that one. So
yeah, but it was interesting in the fact he was sitting down having a meeting with this individual.
For sure, 100%.
Yeah.
And they caused a lot of trouble in Venezuela. And as you know, Venezuela.
And that's why Maduro got rid of them. That's why he put them on planes and sent them to America.
And what President Trump has stated, and if you actually look at the South American reporting, you'll see that there's a lot of truth to this, that, Tren de Aragua is now in league with a cartel that Cartel de Soles, that Maduro himself runs. We know that from indictments in the United States. They basically struck a deal where TDA is not going to do its business in Venezuela, or if it does, it's going to do it under the aegis of the Venezuelan government. But, that leaves them free to go prey upon, communities in Colombia and throughout Central America, and especially in Chile. Chile is a special case. Colombia, as you know, has, dealt with various, drug cartels, drug gangs that started out with political, Marxist political ideologies, but that, quickly, started funding their activities with by moving drugs, growing cocaine or growing poppies, making cocaine, moving cocaine to finance their activities. And they've really moved away from the ideological part. Now they're really just in the drug business.
Yeah.
So Colombia is sort of
money does kind of change the business model, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, because you become a have from a have not.
It's funny he left out the part where a lot of these organizations were funded by the US government as well at the start. But
hey, easy there, buddy. Easy.
I just love the way he kind of jumped over that part. But as you said, money does kind of corrupt a lot of these governments and a lot of these ideologies down south of the border.
Well, yeah, but I don't know that the American funding of this issue makes it not an issue.
But no, it's just an interesting part of history. It's it is strange that a lot of these countries start off kind of very, very left leaning and then just turn into a complete basket case.
Well, yeah, but that's a feature, not a bug. Once you get the power, then you exert the power.
If people really want to know what happens when you go socialism, look through history. It's not good.
Well, I can think of, I don't know, maybe 120 million reasons you wouldn't want to do that. Pretty good ones, too.
Yes.
Organizations like the FARC, which is one of these Marxist drug gangs. Chile isn't. Chile had never had any experience in dealing with transnational criminal organizations like this. And when TDA showed up, it was a problem for them. A local prosecutor that I cited in one of my recent pieces said, they see the most heinous crimes going on there ever since TDA showed up. People tortured and brutalized before they're murdered. But there's one particular murder that took place in Chile, in Santiago, that's important. And that was the kidnapping of Ronald Ojeda. Mr. Ojeda was an oppositionist. He'd been a military officer. He attempted to lead a coup against the Maduro regime. He was briefly imprisoned. He was released. And then he went to Santiago, where he was living under the protection of the Chilean government. One February day, a group of Chilean police officers showed up at his door and took him into custody, or what he thought was Chilean police officers. The Chilean government now alleges that the individuals who, came and, got him, who took him away, were actually members of Tren de Aragua. And they were led by an individual known as El Turco, who is identified as the leader of TDA in Chile. Mr. Ojeda's body was found, and he was killed. His body was found encased in concrete. And, the Chilean government got very, very angry about this. They went looking for El Turco and the other people who were involved. Well, guess where they found El Turco, Larry? They found him in Texas, in a human trafficking operation in Texas in December. And he's currently facing extradition back to Chile to, face charges in connection with the killing of Ronald Ojeda. Wow. That was a political offense that was carried out.
Wow. That is... Wow. That is crazy.
Well, the border was open. Where the hell else is he going to go, bud?
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Sad business.
When you talk about, TDA to most Americans, or you follow most major American outlets, it's a bunch of guys running around apartment complexes in Aurora, Colorado, carrying AR-15s and engaging in, low-level gang activity, the sort we're all familiar with. This is a sophisticated criminal operation. This is like La Cosa Nostra or the mafia, with, carrying out political hits. And that is the basis of what President Trump was, focusing on when he issued Presidential Proclamation 10903.
Right.
And part of PP 10903, as I mentioned, was using the Alien Enemies Act, which permits the president to remove, nationals of a given country out of the United States when there's been an invasion or predatory incursion of this country by.
And this is absolutely a predatory incursion. And the Alien Enemies Act specifically says if it is a predatory incursion, and the person who gets to make that decision, if it is a predatory incursion, is the leader of the Article 2 executive branch of the United States.
And
that's the one that gets to make the proclamation.
How come other presidents haven't used this act in so long when it comes to the likes of the cartels over the last 20 plus years?
Because
everyone can identify, everyone can know who a cartel member is. Even though they might legally have enough to prosecute them, they surely should use this act to just round them up, put them on a plane, and ship them wherever they are.
The cartels are not. So you would have to make a connection between the Mexican government and that the cartels were definitely an arm or a part of the Mexican government, right? TDA under Maduro, when you have Tren de Aragua running gold mines and then performing specific kinds of political hits on like Mr. Ojeda, right? Then you can show, yes, they are an arm of the Venezuelan government. Therefore, the predatory incursion is at the behest of the head of that government, at which point the political connection is made. Then you can issue the act, right? I guess the other presidents just didn't want to, and they just wanted to use 8 USC and 18 USC to effectuate the removal through the immigration process to get rid of them.
I was just curious that it's unusual that other presidents haven't used the same power, especially after 9/11 and so on. I'm just surprised that they never use that act.
I think it's because it's so volatile and it has a bad history. It has been misused in the past, for sure.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
A group or groups. And, he has identified, TDA's activities in the United States as being a predatory incursion. And he has invoked the Alien Enemies Act.
Right.
The Alien Enemies Act is completely different from the Immigration and Nationality Act. That's the law that I'm used to enforcing.
Right.
This one, goes back to 1798, but it's currently codified, 50 U.S. Code, Section 21. It's not a dead law.
If I can jump in on this, because, these groups, these foreign groups wreaking havoc in this country, they don't have to have a direct affiliation with a foreign government for the Alien Enemies Act to be enforced. But in this case, they actually do. You've just said there are dots connected right to the Maduro regime and the Venezuelan government. So it seems like it's completely reasonable within the president's authority to do this. So the federal judges just don't like it. They don't like it because it's an old law. That's the big difference here in terms of how they can step in and say, no, you can't do that.
So what the judges have been saying all along, this all started with Chief Judge James Boberg of the District Court for the District of Columbia, who on a Saturday morning into afternoon into evening issued an order, telling DHS, telling the Trump administration not to move any suspected TDA members under the Alien Enemies Act. At the time that he issued that order, apparently, and the timeline is really unclear, planes carrying TDA members who were removed under the Alien Enemies Act were in the air. And he got very angry. He wanted to know everything that was going on. He wanted to know why they didn't comply with this order, and he accused them of all sorts of malfeasance. That case is still going on.
Yeah.
That part is interesting because the Supreme Court, and the case is called JGG versus Trump, the Supreme Court said Judge Boasberg doesn't have jurisdiction over those cases. For aliens who are removed under the Alien Enemies Act, they get judicial review, or they have, the opportunity to have judicial review, but it's only in habeas. And under the great writ of habeas can only be sought in the jurisdiction in which you're actually being held. None of these people were being held in D.C., Larry.
Yeah, it's based on the area of confinement. If I am in the state of Maryland or Florida or Rhode Island or Idaho, that is where the great writ of habeas, like you can go to a judge and go, hey, I'm being held incorrectly. And they'll pull it up and go, oh no, you're being held incorrectly. Let us ship you to where you're supposed to be being held or set you free, right? But Boasberg, as a district court in D.C., did not have jurisdiction. The Supreme Court told him, "Hey, stop! You don't have jurisdiction."
You don't have jurisdiction. That makes perfect sense,
right? And it's supposed to have been.
And I presume all these individuals given.
Well, the problem is Judge Boasberg knew it when he issued the order. He's not an idiot. He knew he didn't have jurisdiction.
Was he doing for headlines?
Well, no. Well, we can't assume. But the thing is that they brought it in under different auspices. There is another channel, another thing we'll watch on this if you want to in the future. Law of Self-Defense with Andrew Branca. He goes into this.
Oh, yes. He's actually quite good.
Yeah, in minutia. Like literally every line of all of those things.
Videos.
yeah, I've sent you a couple of those. But yeah, he breaks it down shotgun style and shows you where the bullet goes in. You know, so yeah, he's really good. But yeah, Boasberg knew it when he issued the order. He couldn't have not known how the great writ of habeas works. He could not have not. You know what I'm saying? Like there isn't a way he couldn't know. Right?
Yeah, I think, as I say, I think that's a good point where we should start wrapping up today's episode, as they say.
All right. Wow. Well, you know what? That's actually a really good idea because I think we're pretty much about to start getting into the Kilmar Abrego Garcia stuff.
Yes. And I think it's a good cliffhanger, as they say as well.
Do you have anything for the cheap seats in the peanut gallery? What's that, bud? Yes. What do you got?
Don't forget to tell people to subscribe.
Oh, the thing. Right. All right. Hey, check it out. We are the A&P Gents. We are Alex Johansson and Patrick McCallum. Please ring the bell, subscribe, do all the things, make a comment, and help the algorithm help you help us. Thank you and good night.